Hello everybody, my name is Tyler Dreiblatt and I'm the Interpretive Programs Manager here at Fort Miles. We get a lot of questions from people who can't actually come and see us at the fort, so I thought we'd spend a couple minutes with our diorama today and go over kind of the who, what, when, where, why of Fort Miles. So Fort Miles, as the name suggests, was a military base. If we want to get really specific, we would say this was a coastal defense fortification. It was built for the Army in the 1940s to defend the east coast of the United States. If we're talking about the 40s, we're really talking about World War II and Nazi Germany. We were worried that ships like the Bismarck or the Tirpitz might sail over here and start doing damage to the east coast. The Bismarck and the Tirpitz, they were really some of the biggest, baddest ships on the water in the late 30s, early 40s. They could sink anything we had, they could attack any of the forts we had before we could even see them, so we really wanted a big, brand new fortification to take on that threat. But why build it here? You know, unless you're from this area, you have to look pretty close at a map to figure out where Lewis is. The answer is the Delaware Bay and River. We're right here projecting into the bay. If we follow the bay and river up north, we run into some really major industrial and population centers. You've got Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington, Trenton, among other places. And we didn't just want to protect the people living in those cities, we wanted to protect all the stuff that was being made upriver. If you had headed north in the 40s, you would have run into the Philadelphia Naval Yards. They're creating battleships for the American side. You've got the Dravo or Dravo shipyards, depending on how you like to pronounce that. They're creating landing ship tanks. If you've seen movies like Saving Private Ryan or The Longest Day, you know, the ships that go up on shore, the doors come down, all the guys come off. They're like small versions of landing ship tanks, so they were being produced up north. You had the Hercules Company making gunpowder. You can't really fight a war without gunpowder, so that was pretty important. And you may have heard of a little company called DuPont before. They were really heavily involved in war production, especially making nylon. We had used silk for a lot of war materials like powder bags and parachutes, but silk comes from Asia. And in the 1930s, Japan invaded China, war broke out in Asia, and that silk supply stopped coming over here. So we switched from using silk to nylon, and the DuPont company had actually patented nylon in the 30s. So they were some of the only people in the world making this really important war material. Once all of that stuff was produced, it would make its way downriver, large convoys of ships would form up inside the bay, and then they would head overseas to resupply our allies in Europe and Africa. So Fort Miles was really built right here to make sure those big German battleships couldn't sail over and close off that important lifeline. If we look at the diorama, we can see that Fort Miles is a lot more than just the couple buildings that make up the current historic area. Fort Miles took up basically everything that's now Cape Henlopen State Park. So if you do come and visit us here, anywhere you go in the park, you're walking through what used to be Fort Miles. It was really like its own little city with its own police force, fire station, even a baseball team. And it took somewhere between 2,300 to 2,500 people to run this place. The largest group of those people were the men of the 261st Coastal Artillery. They actually started out as the Delaware National Guard unit, so they were all pretty much local guys from Kent and Sussex County, and in 1941 they were federalized, so they were brought into the military as a whole and sent down to garrison what would become Fort Miles. When they got down here, they didn't find a whole lot except cranberry bogs, so they originally called this place Camp Cranberry. And that name obviously doesn't stick. We're not Fort Cranberry, we're Fort Miles. We're named after a gentleman called Nelson Appleton Miles. He actually got his start in the Civil War. He took 2 bullets to the hip at the Battle of Chancellorsville, which earned him a Medal of Honor and stay in a hospital for the rest of the war. Once he healed up, he made his way out west and really started making a name for himself fighting what we now call the Indian Wars. Out there, he was under the command of a man named General Terry, kind of an unfamiliar name, but I'm sure you've heard of General Custer. George Custer is pretty well known for getting his whole troop wiped out at the Battle of Little Bighorn. When that whole debacle went down, General Terry, as Custer's commander, was forced to stand aside a little bit, and the man who eventually replaced him was Nelson Appleton Miles. He rises up through the ranks. He eventually becomes the highest ranked general in the entire United States Army. He retired in 1903, he died in 1925. As the story goes, he died saluting the flag while the anthem played at a state fair. I'm not sure how true that story is, but it gives you a good idea of the regard he was held in, at least back in the 1920s. In that little story, however, you didn't hear anything about Delaware. He wasn't born here, he didn't die here. As far as we know, he was never even in the state. So why is Fort Miles named after this guy? Well, on the naming commission, there was another General Miles, and it was Nelson Miles' son, Sherman. And he's going down the list of available names. He says, hey, nobody's named a fort after dear old Dad yet. So he really gets it in his head that this is the best way for him to honor his father, and he's the one who really leads the drive to name this place Fort Miles. So there we have it, a little bit of the who, what, when, where, why. Fort Miles was a coastal defense fort built for the Army in the 1940s, manned by a lot of local Delawareans, and named after General Nelson Appleton Miles. We hope to see you soon, and check in next time. Thanks, everybody.